Tonight's story will be Little Imani's Flowers, my very own interpretation of Hans Christian Andersen's Little Ida's Flowers. Let's begin. My poor flowers are quite dead, said little Imani. They were so pretty last evening, but now every leaf has withered and drooped. Why do they do that? She asked her sister, who sat on the sofa. Imani loved her older sister because she told such good stories and could cut the most interesting things out of paper. Hearts with stars in them, flowers of all sorts, and any animal Imani could think of. She was definitely her best friend. Why do my flowers look so sick today? She asked her again, and showed her the withered bouquet. Don't you know what's the matter with them? Her sister said. They were at the ball last night. That's why they can barely hold their heads up. Flowers can't dance, said little Imani. Oh, yes, they can, said her sister. As soon as it gets dark and we go to sleep, they frolic about in a fine fashion. Almost every night they have a dance. Can children go to the ball? Little daisies can go. So can lilies of the valley. Where do the prettiest flowers dance? Imani asked. Do you remember visiting the beautiful flower garden just outside of town? Around the castle where the queen lives in the summertime. You know, the place where the swans swim close when you offer them breadcrumbs. Believe me, that's where the prettiest flowers dance. Yesterday, I was there with Grandma, said Imani, but there wasn't a leaf on the trees or a flower left. Where are they? Last summer, I saw so many. They're inside the castle, of course, said her sister, confidentially, just as soon as the queen comes back to town with all of her court. The flowers run from the garden into the castle and enjoy themselves. You should see them. The two loveliest roses climb up on the throne where they're the king and the queen. All the red poppies line up on either side to stand and bow like gentlemen. Then all the best-dressed flowers come, and the grand ball starts. The blue violets, having arrived in such a large group, partner with all the hyacinths and crocuses. The tulips and tiger lilies are the old chaperones, who see to it that everyone behaves themselves properly. But, said little Imani, doesn't anybody punish the flowers for dancing in the queen's own castle? Nobody knows a thing about it, said her sister. There's even the old castle keeper who's there to watch over things. And sometimes he comes in the night with his enormous bunch of keys, but as soon as the flowers hear the keys jangle, they keep quiet and hide, with only their heads peeking out from behind the curtains. Then the old castle keeper says, I smell flowers in here. But he can't see any. What fun, said little Imani as she clapped her hands. But how do I see the flowers? Oh, easily, said her sister. The very next time you go there, remember to peep in the windows. There you'll see them as I did today. A tall yellow lily lay stretched on the sofa, reading a book. Can the flowers who live in the botanical gardens visit the castle? Can they go that far? Why, certainly. They can fly all the way if it suits them. Haven't you seen lovely butterflies, white, yellow, and red ones? They almost look like flowers, and that's really what they used to be. They are flowers, who jumped off their stems high into the air. They beat the air with their petals as though they were little wings, and so they managed to fly. If they behave themselves nicely, they get permission to fly all day long. instead of having to go home and sit on their stems. In time, their petals turned to real wings. Now, it is possible that the botanical garden flowers have never been to the Queen's castle and don't know anything about the fun that goes on there almost every night. So, the next time you visit the garden, tell one of the flowers that they're having a grand ball in the castle. One flower will tell the others, and off they will fly. How can flower tell the others? You know flowers can't speak. They can't speak, her sister agreed, but they can signal. Haven't you noticed that when the breeze blows, the flowers nod to one another and make signs with their leaves? Why, it's as plain as talk. How can anyone stuff a child's head with such nonsense? Said their father, who had come to sit and watch TV on the couch. He did not like Imani's sister telling such tall tales, such ridiculous fantasy. He grumbled under his breath as he settled in. But to little Imani, what her sister told her about flowers was marvelously amusing, and she kept right on thinking about it. Her flowers couldn't hold their heads up because they were tired from dancing all night. Why, they must be ill. She took them to her room with an idea in mind. Imani moved her doll, Sophia, out of her little dolly bed and laid the flowers to rest there. She closed the curtains and read the flowers a story about getting better quick. All evening long, she kept thinking of what her sister had said. Before she climbed into bed, she peered at the withering flowers and whispered very softly, I know you're going to the ball tonight. But the flowers pretended not to understand her. They didn't move a leaf. But little Imani knew all about them. After she was in bed, she lay there for a long while, thinking how pleasant it must be to see the flowers dance in the Queen's castle. Were my flowers really there? She wondered. Then she fell asleep. When she woke up again in the night, she had been dreaming of the flowers and of her sister and her father, who had scolded them, saying her story was silly nonsense. It was very still in the bedroom where Imani was. The night light glowed in the corner, and everyone in the house was sleeping. Are my flowers still asleep in Sophia's bed? Imani wondered. That's what I'd like to know. She lifted herself a little higher on her pillow and looked towards the door, which was slightly ajar. In the other room were her flowers and all her toys. She listened, and it seemed to her that someone was playing the piano very softly and more beautifully than she had heard it ever played before. I'm pretty sure that those flowers are all dancing, she said to herself. Oh my goodness, wouldn't I love to see them? But she did not dare get up because she might wake someone. I do wish the flowers would come in here, she thought. But they didn't. The music kept playing, and it sounded so lovely that she could not stay in bed another minute. She tiptoed to the door and peeped into the next room. Oh, how funny! What a sight she saw there! The moonlight streamed through the window upon the middle of the floor, and it was almost as bright as day. The hyacinths and the tulips lined up in two long rows across the floor. Not one was left by the window. The flower pots stood there empty, while the flowers danced gracefully around the room, making a complete chain and holding each other by their long green leaves as they swung around. At the piano sat a tall yellow lily. Little Imani remembered it from last week because her cousin said, "Doesn't that look like Auntie Yvonne?" Everyone had laughed at the time, but now Imani noticed that there was a most striking resemblance. When the lily played, it had the same mannerisms as her aunt, sometimes bending its long yellow face to one side, sometimes to the other, and nodding in time with the lovely music. No one suspected little Imani was there. She saw a nimble blue crocus jump up on the table where her toys were, go straight to the doll's bed, and throw back the curtains. The sick flowers lay there, but they got up at once and nodded that they were coming down to the others, that they also wanted to dance. The old Barbie doll, whose leg was missing, rose and made a bow to the pretty flowers. They looked quite themselves again as they jumped down to join the others and have a good time. It seemed as if something clattered off the table. Little Imani looked and saw that the wizard wand that had been left over from Halloween was jumping down as if he thought he were a flower too. The wand did cut a flowery figure with his paper rosettes and, to top him off, a little hat. The wand skipped about on his two wooden legs and stamped them as hard as he could. The flowers could not copy his dance because they were too light to stamp as he did. All of a sudden, the wand figure grew tall and important. He whirled around to the paper flowers beside him and said, "How can anyone stuff a child's head with such nonsense? A ridiculous ridiculous fantasy. At that moment, he was a perfect image of Imani's father, looking just as cross. But the paper flowers hit back. They struck his thin shanks until he crumpled up into nothing more but a termite. The change was so ridiculous that little Imani could not keep from laughing. Just then, they all heard a knocking in the drawer where Imani's doll, Sophia, lay with the other toys. The Barbie doll rushed to the edge of the table, laid flat on her stomach, and managed to pull open the drawer the rest of the way. Sophia sat up and looked around her, most surprised. "Why, they're having a ball," she said. "Why hasn't somebody told me about it?" "Won't you dance with me?" the Barbie asked her. "A fine partner you'd be," she said, and turned her back on her. She sat on the edge of the drawer, hoping one of the flowers would ask her to dance. But not one of them did. She coughed, and still not one of them asked her. To make matters worse, the Barbie doll had gone off dancing by herself, which she did pretty well. As none of the flowers paid the least amount of attention to Sophia, she let herself tumble from the drawer to the floor with a bang. Now the flowers all came running to ask, "Did you hurt yourself?" They were very polite to her, especially those who had slept in her bed. But she wasn't hurt in the least bit. Imani's flowers thanked her for the use of her nice bed and treated her well. They took her out in the middle of the floor where the moon shone and danced with her while the other flowers made a circle around them. Sophia wasn't at all cross now. She said they might keep her bed. She didn't in the least mind sleeping in the drawer. But the flowers said, "Thank you, but no, we can't live long enough to keep your bed. Tomorrow we shall be dead. Tell little Imani to bury us in the garden next to the tree. Then we shall come up again next summer, more beautiful than ever before." "Oh, you mustn't die," Sophia said, and hugged all the flowers. Then the window opened, and many more splendid flowers glided in. Imani couldn't imagine where they had come from, unless, why, they must have come straight from the Queen's castle. First came 2 magnificent roses wearing little gold crowns. These were the king and the queen. Then came the charming gillyflowers and carnations, who greeted everybody. They brought the musicians along. Large poppies and peonies blew upon pea pods until they were red in the face. Blue hyacinths and little snowdrops tinkled their bells. It was such funny music. Many other flowers followed them, and they all danced together. Blue violets with pink primroses, and daisies with lilies of the valley. All the flowers seemed to dance as if they were part of a ballet. When the time came to say good night, little Imani snuck back to bed, where she dreamt of all she had seen. The end. Thank you for reading that story with me. I hope you have a very good night.